chosen one, listen carefully, because God does not repeat a warning forever. And tonight He is telling me plainly that this is the final time this particular word will be released over your life. Not because He is losing patience with you, but because the season for warning is closing, and the season for consequence, either protection received or protection ignored, is about to begin. There is a person in your life right now who you have already sensed something about, someone your discernment has quietly flagged more than once, someone you have talked yourself out of trusting your own instincts about, because it felt easier, kinder, or simply less exhausting than facing what your spirit already knows. Tonight, God is asking you to stop talking yourself out of it. Before we go further, if you are new here, subscribe now and turn on the bell, because this word unfolds in layers, and the final layer, the one that matters most, comes near the end. If you already belong to this family, thank you for staying faithful to this place. Now comment. 777. If a specific person's face already came to mind the moment I said the word warning, let me ask you something, because I already suspect I know the answer. Have you ever explained away a feeling because the person attached to it was someone you loved, someone you did not want to believe could be capable of working against you? Have you noticed a pattern of small inconsistencies, moments where their story shifted slightly depending on who they were speaking to, moments you brushed aside because confronting the pattern felt more frightening than ignoring it? Have you felt your energy drop specifically after spending time with this person, a heaviness that follows you home and takes hours, sometimes days, to fully lift? Have you caught yourself defending them to other people more often than the relationship itself would naturally require, as if some part of you already suspects you are the only one still willing to make excuses for them? If any of this is landing in your chest right now, I want you to know this is not the first time God has tried to show you this. It is simply the loudest. Here is what I need you to understand before we go deeper, because this changes the weight of everything I am about to say. God does not typically reveal something significant only once. He is patient and He is gentle, and He gives you chance after chance to arrive at truth in your own timing, through your own growing discernment, without forcing you into a confrontation you are not ready for. But patience is not the same as an unlimited invitation to keep avoiding what you already know. There comes a point where continuing to ignore a warning stops being innocent, unawareness, and starts becoming a choice. And God is telling me tonight that for some of you watching, you are standing right at that threshold. I want to be clear about something before we continue, because I do not want fear to distort what this word actually is. This is not a message telling you to panic, to cut someone off without wisdom, or to treat every uncomfortable relationship in your life as a threat. Discernment is not the same as suspicion of everyone around you. This word is specific. It is about one particular person, someone you already know exactly who I am describing. Even if you have spent months or years refusing to say their name, even in your own private thoughts. Scripture tells us in Matthew 7 verse 15, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them." Notice that verse does not say you will recognize them by their words, by their promises, by how convincingly they explain themselves when questioned. It says you will recognize them by their fruit, by the actual pattern of what their presence produces in your life over time. If the fruit around this person has consistently been exhaustion, doubt, tension, or a quiet erosion of your peace, that fruit has already told you everything their words have been working overtime to obscure. I want to pause here for a moment, because I can already feel some of you bracing yourselves, already rehearsing the excuses you have used for this person for years, excuses that once felt like grace, and now, if you are honest, feel more like avoidance. I am not asking you to abandon compassion, I am asking you to stop confusing compassion with self-abandonment. You can still care about someone's well-being while refusing to keep absorbing the cost of their unresolved issues onto your own life. Here is the first sign that this warning has reached its final stage. The excuses you make for them are starting to sound thinner even to you, the person saying them. You notice yourself hesitating slightly before defending them now. A pause that was not there a year ago. A flicker of doubt in your own voice as you repeat explanations you used to believe completely. That hesitation is not weakness. It is growth. It is your discernment, finally strong enough to notice the gap between what you are saying out loud and what you actually believe underneath it. I want you to comment, "I received this." If you have noticed that exact hesitation recently, that small crack in your own certainty about someone you have defended for a long time. Let me tell you a short story before we continue, because I think it will help this settle the way it is meant to. There was once a shepherd who kept noticing his flock growing thinner in numbers each season, though he never once witnessed an attack himself. He assumed illness, assumed wandering, assumed 100 explanations that kept him from confronting the one possibility that frightened him most, that something inside his own camp, disguised carefully as one of his own, had been quietly leading sheep away when no one else was watching. It was only when an old friend, someone with nothing to gain from lying to him, gently pointed out the pattern he had been too close to see, that the shepherd finally allowed himself to look directly at what his own eyes had been avoiding for months. The moment he did, protecting the rest of his flock became simple, not because the threat disappeared, but because he finally stopped pretending it was not there. I need to pause again here because I want to speak honestly to something underneath tonight's word, a fear some of you are carrying, about what happens after you finally admit this to yourself. You are afraid that acknowledging the truth means you have to do something dramatic immediately. End a relationship publicly. Confront them tonight. Explain yourself to everyone who has watched you defend this person for years. I want you to release that pressure right now. Acknowledging truth privately, to yourself and to God, is not the same as being required to act publicly and immediately. You are allowed to know something fully before you decide what to do about it. Here is the second sign. Pay attention to how this person responds when you begin, even slightly, to set boundaries you never set before. Someone whose intentions towards you are genuinely healthy will feel some discomfort when a boundary appears, because change is uncomfortable for everyone, but they will ultimately respect it, even if it takes them time to adjust. Someone whose intentions have not been healthy will react with something closer to alarm, an intensified effort to pull you back into the old pattern. Guilt trips, sudden displays of affection, timed suspiciously close to your first attempt at distance, or subtle punishment disguised as hurt feelings. Watch not what they say about your boundary. Watch what they do the moment it actually threatens their access to you. Proverbs 4 verse 23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." That verse is not only about romantic love, it is about every relationship you allow close enough to shape your daily peace. Guarding your heart sometimes means guarding it against people you love, not because loving them was wrong, but because access and closeness are not obligations owed automatically to everyone who claims to care about you. I want to pause once more here, because I want to address a specific kind of guilt many of you are carrying right now. Guilt over even considering distance from someone with history attached to them, someone who has been present for years, someone whose absence would leave a visible gap in your life that other people would notice and ask about. I understand that fear, but I need you to hear this clearly. Longevity is not the same as health. Time spent with someone does not automatically make their presence safe, and choosing to protect your peace now does not erase or dishonor whatever good existed in the relationship earlier. Both things can be true. Something can have mattered once, and still not be safe to continue carrying forward unchanged. Here is the third sign, and I want you to sit with this one honestly. You have started noticing that other people in your life, people with nothing invested in the outcome either way, have gently hinted at concerns about this person without you ever bringing it up first. A friend who mentioned something felt off. A family member who chose their words carefully but clearly. Someone who is not close enough to have an agenda, simply observing from a distance and noticing what your closeness has made harder for you to see clearly. When multiple outside voices, unprompted, start echoing something your own spirit has already whispered, that convergence is rarely coincidence. I want you to comment Amen if you believe God still speaks through the people around us, even the ones who are not directly involved in the situation being revealed. Here is the fourth sign. You will feel a strange, almost immediate relief the moment you even consider stepping back. A relief that arrives before any actual distance has occurred, simply from entertaining the possibility. That relief is important information. Relationships that are genuinely good for you rarely produce relief at the thought of distance. They produce a natural resistance to distance because closeness itself feels good. If the idea of stepping back brings your body a sense of loosening rather than loss, your nervous system has already told you something your mind has been slower to accept. I think about the story of Delilah sometimes when I think about warnings that go unheeded, not because every situation is that extreme, but because the pattern is instructive. Samson was warned repeatedly through the accumulating evidence of betrayal that kept presenting itself in smaller ways before the final, devastating one. Each time he explained it away, believed a new promise, told himself this time would be different. The tragedy was never that he lacked warning. The tragedy was that he kept overriding it, convinced his own strength could absorb the cost of ignoring what had already been shown to him clearly more than once. God is not asking you to relive that story. He is asking you to let this be the moment you finally stop overriding what has already been shown to you. Here is the fifth sign, and this one requires real honesty. Ask yourself quietly whether the version of yourself around this person is someone you actually like, someone steady, someone at peace, someone who feels like herself or himself fully, or whether you become smaller around them, more anxious, more careful, constantly monitoring your own words in a way you do not have to, with people who are genuinely safe. The truest measure of whether a relationship is healthy is rarely found in analyzing the other person exclusively. It is found in honestly observing who you become in their presence. Because presence that requires you to shrink is rarely presence worth continuing to protect at your own expense. I want to speak for a moment about the specific weight that comes when the person this warning is about shares history with your whole family, not just with you individually, because this situation carries a complexity that a simple stranger never would. When someone is embedded into family gatherings, group chats, shared friendships, and years of collective memory, distancing yourself does not feel like a private decision. It feels like a public announcement, one that might require explanations you are not ready to give, questions from people who only know the surface version of the relationship, and the discomfort of watching others continue to embrace someone you now see differently. I want you to know, you are not required to explain your discernment to satisfy everyone else's comfort. You are allowed to quietly adjust your own closeness without staging a public case for why. Not every boundary requires a courtroom presentation to the people around you. Here is the sixth sign, and I want you to consider this one carefully because it is often the hardest to notice from the inside. You have started rehearsing conversations with this person in your head far more than you used to, defending yourself in imaginary arguments, preparing responses to accusations that have not even happened yet. That mental rehearsal is exhausting. And it is also revealing. People do not typically spend this much internal energy preparing for conflict with someone who consistently makes them feel safe. If a significant portion of your inner life has become occupied with managing an anticipated conflict that has not even occurred, that occupation itself is telling you something about how much unresolved tension already exists beneath the surface of this relationship. I want to tell you about another layer of this pattern that deserves honest attention. The layer involving how this person treats other people when they believe you are not paying close attention. Have you witnessed moments, even brief ones, where their tone shifted with someone else in a way that surprised you? A flash of impatience, dismissiveness, or unkindness aimed at someone with less power in the situation than you have. Character revealed toward people who cannot offer anything valuable in return is often more accurate than character displayed specifically for you, because it is unfiltered by the motivation to keep your particular goodwill intact. If you have witnessed that unfiltered version even once and quickly excused it as an off moment, I want you to revisit that memory tonight with fresh eyes. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 5 reminds us, "It is better to heed the rebuke of a wise person than to listen to the song of fools." That verse speaks directly to the temptation many of you are facing right now, choosing the comfortable, flattering version of this relationship, the version where everything stays smooth and unquestioned, over the harder, wiser path of finally taking your own rebuke seriously, the quiet correction your own spirit has been offering you for longer than you have been willing to admit. I need to pause here again because I want to acknowledge something painful that some of you are sitting with right now. The grief of realizing that someone you invested years into, someone whose history with you runs deep, may not be who you built them up to be in your own mind. That grief is real, and it deserves space rather than rushing past it toward immediate action. You are allowed to mourn the version of this relationship you believed was true, even while accepting the version that has actually been unfolding underneath it. Grief and clarity are not opposites. They often arrive in the same season, sometimes in the same hour. I also want to gently address a pattern many of you may recognize in yourselves without realizing its significance. The pattern of becoming the designated peacekeeper in every conflict this person creates, smoothing things over, translating their behavior kindly to others, absorbing the emotional labor of managing the fallout from choices you did not make. That role, if you have found yourself in it repeatedly, is not something you were ever supposed to carry indefinitely. Peacekeeping that requires you to consistently minimize your own concerns in order to maintain someone else's comfort is not peace. It is a quiet form of exhaustion, wearing peace as a disguise. Here is something practical to hold on to as you move forward from tonight. Discernment does not require you to have a single dramatic conversation that resolves everything at once. It is far more common and far more sustainable for this kind of shift to happen gradually, through smaller adjustments repeated consistently over time. Responding a little slower to messages than you used to, attending fewer optional gatherings where their presence is guaranteed, sharing a little less of your personal life than you once did, simply as a matter of instinct rather than announcement. These small, quiet shifts often accomplish more real protection than one large confrontation ever could, and they carry far less risk of an explosive reaction that leaves you doubting your own decision under pressure. I want to be honest about one more thing before we move toward closing: the possibility that receiving this word does not lead to full separation at all, but instead leads to a relationship that continues in a much smaller, more carefully guarded form. Not every situation this word applies to requires a complete ending. Some simply require a permanent recalibration of how much access, trust, and vulnerability you extend going forward. You are allowed to keep someone in your life at a distance that finally matches the level of safety they have actually demonstrated, rather than the level of closeness their history with you originally earned. I also want to speak to the fear of losing shared friendships or family, standing as a direct result of stepping back from this person, because that fear is often what keeps people frozen the longest, longer even than fear of the person themselves. Some relationships in your circle may naturally shift as you create distance, and that is a real cost worth acknowledging honestly rather than minimizing. But consider this: the people whose closeness to you was always genuine, rather than simply proximity through this other person, will remain close to you regardless of the distance you create elsewhere. The friendships that quietly dissolve the moment you step back from one particular person were likely never as independently yours to begin with. Here is one final practical thought before we move toward closing. Write down, privately, somewhere only you will see it, 3 specific moments that led you to tonight's clarity. 3 concrete instances rather than a vague feeling alone. Not to build a case to present to anyone else, but to protect your own memory from being softened later by nostalgia, guilt, or the very charm that made this pattern hard to see clearly in the first place. Memory has a way of smoothing over difficult truths once enough time passes and enough kindness resumes. Having something concrete written down gives your future self, the one who might start doubting tonight's clarity in a few weeks, something honest to return to. I am not telling you to end this relationship abruptly tomorrow morning. Some situations require slow, wise, careful distancing rather than a dramatic single event. Some require conversations first, boundaries tested gradually, clarity gathered over time rather than assumed all at once from a single video watched at night. What I am telling you is this: stop pretending you do not already know what you know. The knowing itself does not require you to act instantly, but it does require you to stop lying to yourself about what you have already seen. I also want to speak to the specific fear of being wrong, the fear that you will distance yourself from someone based on discernment, and later discover you misjudged them entirely. I understand that fear, and I will not pretend it is irrational. But consider this: wisdom does not require certainty before it acts carefully. You do not have to prove a case beyond doubt in order to justify protecting your own peace. You are allowed to create distance simply because a relationship costs you more than it gives you, without needing a courtroom level of evidence to justify that choice to anyone, including yourself. Before I close tonight, I want to address something gently, because I do not want this word to become a weapon you use against every uncomfortable relationship in your life going forward. Not every difficult person is a person to warn against. Not every disagreement is a red flag. Growth sometimes feels uncomfortable precisely because it is good for you, the way certain honest feedback stings before it helps. Discernment is not the same as an excuse to avoid anyone who challenges you. This word is specific to a pattern of erosion, not to ordinary friction that exists in every close relationship worth keeping. I want to leave you with one final thought before we close. Warnings from heaven are not designed to frighten you into isolation. They are designed to protect the parts of your life that still need protecting, so that the good things heaven is building in you have room to actually grow without being quietly drained by something you kept excusing out of loyalty, guilt, or fear of what letting go might cost you socially. The relief on the other side of finally listening is almost always larger than the fear of what listening might require. Comment: I receive this one final time if tonight's word has confirmed something you already privately knew, but had not yet said out loud, even to yourself. Share this with someone you know is still making excuses for a relationship that has been quietly draining them for a long time, because sometimes people need permission from outside themselves to finally trust what they already feel internally. Subscribe if this word found you tonight, because what comes next in this series goes even deeper into rebuilding your discernment after a season of ignoring it. Chosen one, hear this clearly as we close. This is the last time this particular warning will come wrapped this gently. Not because God is done caring about your protection, but because you already have everything you need to see clearly now. the hesitation in your own excuses, the relief at the thought of distance, the outside voices that have already echoed what your spirit knew first. You do not need another confirmation. You needed permission to finally trust the one you already received. Take it. Walk forward, lighter, wiser, and finally done pretending you did not already know.